Welcome everybody to another review of the Overwatch League week. Come have a glass of coffee with me, cup of coffee, a mug of coffee. I know, a co-host of mine on our podcast actually drinks quite a bit from a mason jar. And, if there's any bucket lovers out there, come be merry with me as we enjoy some ambrosia. I say ambrosia, and I immediately think of Monty in his erudite friends intro. But I hope you all are well, and let's just kind of review week 3 of the Overwatch League and stage 2 and how interesting it's been. It's been week 3 is pretty surprising, right? Week 3 was pretty weird. Atlanta beating New York. That was pretty bizarre, and then Atlanta losing to Guangzhou. That was not expected in the slightest. Is Dallas completely overrated? Are they overrated going into their own homestand? Which, again, if any unhinged Blizzard employee that will be watching this, any Overwatch League employees will be watching this. I don't know why you're watching this, but best of luck to you all. I hope you guys knock it out of the park. This is going to be super important for the league going forward. This is the first kind of taste of geolocation for the fans, the viewers, people behind the scenes, the players. So this is going to be super, super important, and I wish you all the best of luck, players, coaches as well. We're starting to see things progress. Overwatch League is progressing. I think on Oversight they had mentioned that the viewership is going up, or at least it was, I think, the most viewed Twitch channel or something like that. That's fantastic. Is it the golden ticket to success? Of course not, but it's a nice kind of it's a nice healthy notion, right? We get the doctor's report back and everything's checked off. Everything's going well so far. The homestand is going to be very important, and exactly how things transition later in the year. I expect the gauntlet to be a really big step forward, especially moving into season 3. I think that's going to be very eye-opening for a lot of different people, or a lot of different teams, I should say, and people as well. We're going to see a lot of new players being injected. I think people are actually going to start taking their scouting seriously. Do less in part that they actually have to scout, and there's going to be more of a light kind of pointed towards the contenders' talent and how impressive some of these young players are, and how good they can be. So I think there's going to be a bit of a bonus there, and Overwatch slowly is progressing forward as slow as it is. We love it here. We love and support Overwatch League in this household as much as we complain about it, and as much as we wish it was better. It's because we have that passion, and we want it to succeed, right? But when we look at the games in particular, New York versus Atlanta being the biggest kind of upset in Overwatch history within the last little bit of time. New York always has those games, right? New York always has those one-off games that just they throw, right? Is it a wake-up call? Is it a motivational thing? Are they actually being figured out? I think it is a little bit of everything. I think there's evidence to support all of those claims. I'm a little bit more in support of them being slightly figured out. They are very stylistic, much in the same way. So if I had to set a spectrum, right, I think New York is completely passive, and I think Vancouver is overly aggressive at times, right? So their aggression and passivity, right, as a spectrum. And I think both of those teams, Vancouver Titans and the New York Excelsior, fit on opposite ends of that spectrum. And as beneficial as that is, it can be figured out. It can be kind of reverse engineered, and teams can really prepare for you because they know you're going to play this one style, this one way, and that's your bread and butter. And you're very, very good at it, but there's ways of developing things to kind of punish you there. We saw it with Seoul. We saw Seoul use Sombra to punish their passive style to a fantastic degree. Now, with that in mind, it's not just a stylistic thing. We have seen some misperformances. I think Meko in this match didn't perform up to the caliber that he is known for. And Animo, since playoffs, for me, it's been previous to that. I've been very suspect of him since their match against Paris. So New York versus Paris Eternal. His positioning was very weird on neutral fights as Paris is rotating into King's Row. There's another video on my channel that highlights this. He's just off doing something, and I can't really make out, is it a scouting maneuver? Like, what exactly is he doing? Because he's not threatening any position. Like, his positioning's off. He doesn't kind of fit the standard Lucio framework, and it doesn't look well. His beat timings are very weird. Is probably the weakest point on this roster, but overall, I'm still not willing to drop New York out of top 3. I still think they're third. I think they're very clearly third. But I'm not ignoring motivational issues, preparation, this, that, the other thing, being a little bit lazy. That's going to happen, but it seems like it always happens with New York. It seems like it always happens with London as well, where they just decide to be good or they just decide to be bad. At least that's how the viewers take it. Obviously, there's a lot more nuance to that behind the scenes, but I think New York really has to step it up. They're a team that I thought is leaning on a core of players really, really hard. I'd like to see them make some moves, just to bolster the roster and maybe cause these assumed motivational issues to go away. We've seen Korean teams in the past use a second roster and filtering those players up in scrims to kind of light a fire under these players and say, look, your spot's not guaranteed. You can go. If you want to start, you have to improve. You have to stay on your game. As crazy and as hectic as the league is, you still want to perform well, and New York has an expectation of excellence. So seeing them, actually perform a little bit poorly against one of the bottom middle pack of the teams is worrisome. Now we have to talk about the Guangzhou Charge, because I sillily, dumbly made the comment that I thought that there was a possibility. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I don't exactly remember what my quote was, but I think I was pretty bullish on the fact that I thought that Charge was going to stage playoffs. And that is painfully not the case with them going into week 4, winning one match and having a map differential of -15. That is painful, to say the least. They are not making stage playoffs. It is now confirmed going into week 4 that they are out of playoff contention, which sucks. I think... Let's go back. I think I remember on Oversight, Hexagram's talking about how their schedule was really difficult. And I believe it is. And I think they're finally just kind of finished with all the difficult matches. I think they were very front-loaded in terms of a schedule. So stage 1, they had Chengdu, they had Dallas, they had Vancouver. That's difficult. Florida, that's a cakewalk. Valiant. Shouldn't have been a cakewalk, but was. Gladiators, and then Vancouver again. And then in stage 2, they've had... Excuse me as I take a look at this. Paris, San Francisco, that's difficult. Gladiators is difficult. San Francisco again. Spark, which is doable, and Atlanta, which was doable. So they have been pretty front-loaded, which shouldn't surprise me in hindsight that they've done as poorly as they have in stage 2. But it's very obvious there's been a dip in form with them in terms of just overall power. Their GOAT's coordination has just been all over the place. I thought Chara was okay last stage. Now he's kind of taking the aggressive Lucio a little bit too far and not being calculated on when and where. It seems like he's just going in with this berserker aggression and trying to set up these plays. Rio still feels like a Korean main tank to me in the GOATS meta. They're overly charge happy, and that's basically what I mean. Korea has a very specific style of how they play GOATS. There's very telling attributes to a Korean team, at least for me. Well, I shouldn't say that. An Eastern team. I think China and Korea have a very similar style of GOATS play. Their main tanks are pretty shift happy, whether it's on Monkey or Winston, or Monkey and Reinhardt. Their support ult usage is kind of odd. They like to use their transcendences to cover aggression onto their own grabs, which isn't needed, and that kind of puts them at a weird tempo disadvantage. You would assume that Transcendence is a tempo play, but it ends up not being. It's kind of like a weird misstep. And those are two things that I attribute very much so to Eastern GOATS play. Whether or not that pertains to Pacific and the Australia region, those two kind of wild cards that I don't know too terribly much about, but I will be studying come middle of the stage, I think. We'll have to see. We'll have to see exactly what their GOATS play looks like. From the most part, from the outside looking in, those two regions are very Sombra heavy, and they play a lot of DPS, which is very similar to China and not so much to Korea. But again, we digress. What else? What else? The Spark are getting a little bit better, I'd say. After their win against Boston, I was pretty impressed. They beat Guangzhou, which, again, this is a hindsight argument. Guangzhou has been slowly improving over the stage, so that victory isn't as just locked in, like they had to fight for it, and that 3-2 scoreline was a little bit worrying, but it's kind of explained itself through time, if that makes sense. But I will say, going back to Guangzhou, moving Eileen into the roster full time is something that Hexagram's kind of coined, I'd say, and I like it. I like it a lot. I do agree with him that you don't need to run the best composition to beat some of these middle of the pack teams, and I do think Eileen has a lot of flexibility. The name should ring a bell to kind of World Cup viewers. I believe he was in the 2016 World Cup, and I have the page open, so why don't I just check before I absolutely wreck myself. 2017 World Cup. He was a part of the 2017 World Cup, where China didn't do as well as they did in 2018, to be fair, but still very talented DPS player, kind of more focused on the projectile aspect. So Asfara and his Genji are very, very, very good. His Sombra, he was an early expert in Contenders China season 2 of last year. Solid there as well. His Doomfist has looked very, very good. And I want to see that flexibility integrated more into this roster. When you have players like Eileen, when you have players like Shu and Happy, you can run some very stylistic things and just brute force yourself wins with mechanics. I think Guangzhou is a good team, as much as I kind of questioned them at the beginning of the season, in the preseason, with how their roster was built. It's been a good showing from them so far. They kind of have fallen where I expected them to, but I assume, depending on the patch changes, depending on what happens with GOATS, that they could seriously improve in the future. They have the talent there, 100%. They just need to tighten things up a little bit, I'd say. But Spark look better. Charge improving. Chengdu, I don't know what's wrong with them. They've kind of become a little too gimmicky this stage. I want to see them kind of pepper in a little bit more GOATS. I wasn't too sad, or I was actually pretty surprised with their GOATS play, but what you tended to see was that they'd throw some body shots, right? They'd throw some weird compositions at the body of the enemy team, have them start to drop their guard a little bit, and then they'd start to throw some GOATS at you. And you have to be able to shift positions. You have to do those level changes and be able to match them at every single one of these turns. Now, are they experts at all of these different angles? Maybe at like the DPS angle, they're the only team that's been able to find serious success with it. So you know, you're going to have to be a team that knows what they're getting into in preparation for this match. But when it comes to GOATs, they should still be able to compete, and they're not. And it's like they're choosing not to. Now, yes, their main tank, that is a very traditional main tank, isn't with the team of Jachirin, but regardless of that, Umming has proven to be capable on the Reinhardt. Is he the strongest Reinhardt in the world? No, obviously not. But you can put him back on the ball. Like there are ways to kind of reinvent your own style by going back to what worked previously and still using the Symmetra teleporter, Bastion strats, this, that, the other thing. Changing those levels is going to be important for Chengdu, and not just being entirely rigid and this is the style we play now and this is all that we can do and this is what we've worked on. I get it. But if they want to succeed, I don't think they're completely out of stage playoff contention. They're 2-2 with a +2. Their next two matches are going to be pretty difficult. This is an improved Spark going into week 4, and then you have London, which seem to have shored up all their weaknesses and look like a very rejuvenated team. So week 4 for Chengdu is going to be very difficult. In week 5, they play the Valiant, and I think that's it. Let me just double check because I am an unprepared Dumby. Yeah, they play Valiant as their last match. So it's gonna be tough. They're gonna have to deal with some travel going into week 4. That's gonna definitely stress players out. Will that play into Chengdu overperforming or seemingly overperforming because people haven't had the prep time? There's been travel errors, this, that, the other thing. Like week 4 might have some upsets because of that. I will say I haven't given that much credence in my arguments and, you know, in my predictions. So maybe week 4 is going to be crazy. And looking at those matches, we have Paris and London kicking off Saturday. My opinion, I think this goes London pretty handedly almost. Then you have Spark Chengdu. I think that could go either way. I'm willing to give it to Spark. That's an improved Spark. They're finally getting, you know, a little bit more confident on stage. Guxia looks really good. IDK has become an absolute carry clutcher for this team. Crystal's being integrated more, which is something that I was kind of critical on. I don't remember if I said that they weren't going to get play all season, but I was pretty confident that they were going to see too much play stage 1. They had Guxia integrated in the roster. We were just waiting on Crystal. Now he's here. He looks really good. Things are improving. Chengdu have been kind of falling down the strategical arms race, as it were. So I think that's like 3-2 Spark. Houston Seoul, that's Seoul all the way, 4-0. We can talk about Houston after this. Valiant Dallas, I think that might be a little bit more difficult for Dallas than people are giving them credit for. There are some intangibles there that could indeed come to fruition. As much as you have the 7th man in Overwatch, you know, the fans cheering for you and rooting for you, that puts a lot of pressure on a player. That puts a lot of pressure on the coaching staff. That adds a lot of weight to every little move that they make, and you can get stuck in your own head in that sense. And Valiant is a team that is not expected to do well. Nobody's expecting them. They have that hunger. They have that underdog mentality, and that's proven to be something that people can utilize if everything goes well behind the scenes, which, again, Valiant has been criticized for maybe not having the best team cohesion, but having that underdog mentality is very powerful. You could see an upset here. I don't think it's likely, but out of the 2 days, Valiant Dallas might be more of an upset. I know my dear friend Kick Tripod thinks that Houston is going to beat Dallas. I don't think that's in the cards at all. But in the same way that I'm talking about Valiant, you could prescribe that to Houston as well. You know, nobody's expecting them to do well. They'll actually have fans in the crowd. There's I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hit you. There is some merit there to that argument that they might be able to beat them. Going into Sunday, we have the Spark versus Paris. I have this going to Paris, I think. Yes, I think they're going to Paris. Paris, okay, so the reasoning behind that, Paris practices and prepares for London and Spark, whereas Spark prepares for Chengdu and Paris, if that makes sense. So Spark has to split practice time on two different kind of metas, where Paris gets to prepare for one specific meta. Now, can Spark adapt in time? Probably. I think most of these teams can. But Paris is going to have a lot more prepared for them in particular, because that practice is going to compound in on itself. So with that in mind, I think Paris takes a small edge there. You might actually see a tie on, what map do they play for 2CP? Anubis. Yeah, you could see a tie for Anubis. Paris looks a little... This is more of a stage 1 prescription, but they haven't looked the best on Anubis, in my opinion. Whether it's Soon's grabs or their rigidity on goats, has it been the best ever? So I think Paris takes that slightly. I'm going to say 2-1. They tie on Assault. Chengdu into London. That's a London 4-0 sweep. Not a problem. I've mentioned this before on other shows. Chengdu wants to play DPS. Cool. Here's Prophet. Here's Legacy Birdring. Here's Gesture playing a very aggressive Winston. Here's Badoshan being able to kind of become the carry Zenyatta that he needs to, and even flex if they really want to opt into the Clown Fiesta metagame that Chengdu can throw at teams. I don't think London, I don't think there is a world that Chengdu beats London. Well, I shouldn't say that. There is a world where London can decide that they're just going to lose that day, that they don't prep for Chengdu even in the slightest bit. But there again, I don't think they need to prep for them all that much. I think they can just go full scrap mode. They can just play goats into them. This is very cut and dry London for me, as much as I am a Chinese fanboy, right? Seoul Valiant. This is Seoul. Seoul looks to be very improved. There's reports saying that the coaching staff for Seoul hasn't benched Fissure for attitude issues. It's just, the best roster they can field, which is great. It's a PR answer, but maybe there has some merit there. I have no idea. All I know is that Seoul looks to be improved. They've made some changes that I was very critical of. When you make that many roster moves, you assume there's internal strife, and there very well could be, and we're just not getting any knowledge of it. But Seoul looks good, and Valiant doesn't. So I'm going to say Seoul. This is very much a Seoul matchup. Victory 4-0. And then you have Houston, Dallas. I don't see Houston winning this, even with, a possible upset from Valiant. I don't think that discourages Dallas at all. I think this is just I wouldn't say a bloodbath, but very clearly, convincingly a Dallas victory. I'll say 3-1. Houston might be able to take. Do they play Busan? Lijiang Tower. It's not Busan. Like, Houston has some pretty cheesy Busan strats that might be able to catch Dallas off guard, but they don't play Busan. I'll give them control just because it is a volatile game type. So I'm going to say Dallas there as well. There's a very good chance that Houston, going into them as a topic, there's a good chance that they just don't win a game this stage. They're currently 0-3. Their next 4 are Seoul, loss, Dallas, convincing loss. They play Guangzhou, again, an improved charge, a charge team that's starting to catch their a little bit of momentum after beating Atlanta, after taking Spark to Game 5. I don't see Houston beating them. And then they play London. If London maintains the style, which I haven't seen any indication that they aren't, it's a loss there as well. So there's a good chance that your stage 2 team, your stage 2 0-7, call up that buddy, Owen, and let him know you've got 7, I don't know, blackjacks. I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that. But that's your stage 2 week 3 review. We'll see you in week 4. If you liked the video, like the content, let me know down below, and follow me on Twitter at Volamel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you very much. Love your faces. Bye.